The butter had been churned at dawn, the apples peeled by lamplight, and now Clara Mae Thornton stood before the judging table at the Sweetwater County Fair with flour dust still clinging to her dark hair, watching three stern-faced women deliberate over her lattice-topped apple pie as if they were deciding the fate of nations. It was the summer of 1882, and the Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the fairgrounds outside San Angelo, turning the air thick and heavy with the scent of livestock, fried dough, and ambition. Clara had spent the better part of 3 days perfecting that pie, using the last of the cinnamon her mother had tucked away before passing 2 winters ago, mixing it with the tart green apples from the gnarled tree behind their small ranch house. Her father had thought her foolish for entering, said she should be focusing on practical matters like mending fences and managing their dwindling cattle herd, but Clara had needed this. She had needed something that was entirely hers, something that might prove she was more than just another pair of hands struggling to keep a failing ranch afloat. The head judge, Mrs. Beatrice Caldwell, lifted a silver fork to her lips, and Clara held her breath. The woman's expression remained impassive as she chewed, consulted with her companions in hushed whispers, then reached for the blue ribbon. First place in the fruit pie category goes to Miss Clara Mae Thornton, Mrs. Caldwell announced, her voice carrying across the pavilion. The world seemed to tilt sideways for a moment. Clara felt her knees go weak as applause rippled through the small crowd gathered around the baking competition. She stepped forward on unsteady legs, accepting the ribbon with trembling hands, barely hearing Mrs. Caldwell's words of praise about the perfect balance of sweetness and spice, the flaky crust that melted on the tongue. All she could think was that her mother would have been proud, that for once something had gone right, that maybe she was not as lost as she had felt since they had laid her mother in the hard Texas earth. "Congratulations, miss," a deep voice said from somewhere to her left. Clara turned, still clutching the ribbon, and found herself looking into the bluest eyes she had ever seen. They belonged to a tall man in his mid-20s, wearing a dusty brown hat, a faded work shirt rolled up to reveal tanned forearms, and a smile that seemed to contain just a hint of mischief. He had the weathered look of someone who spent his days under the open sky, with sun-creased skin and calloused hands, but there was something gentle in the way he regarded her. "Thank you," Clara managed, suddenly aware that her own dress was her second best, a faded calico that had seen better days, and that her hair was probably a disaster after the morning's frantic preparations. "That pie of yours made every other entry look like horse feed," he continued, tipping his hat. "I'm not much for sweets usually, but I'd trade a month's wages for a slice of that." Despite herself, Clara felt a smile tugging at her lips. "A month's wages seems excessive for pie, mister. Not for pie like that, and the name's Cole Ashford." He extended a hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Clara took it. His grip was firm and warm, and she felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. "I work the Bar 7 Ranch about 20 miles north of here. Trail boss and head wrangler, though right now I'm mainly just trying not to get trampled by the crowds." Clara withdrew her hand, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Clara Thornton. My father and I have a small spread east of town, the Running T, though there's not much running to it these days." Something shifted in Cole's expression, a flicker of understanding. Times were hard for the small ranchers, squeezed between the big cattle operations and the changing markets. "Your father here with you today?" "No, he stayed back to deal with some trouble we've been having. Lost 3 head last week, and we can't afford to lose any more." Clara was not sure why she was telling this stranger about their problems, but something about his steady gaze made the words come easier. "He thinks it might be rustlers or maybe just coyotes getting bolder. Either way, we're stretched thin." Cole frowned, his jaw tightening. "That's rough luck. You need help tracking them down." "I barely know you," Clara pointed out, though the offer warmed something inside her that had been cold for a long time. Fair enough, Cole acknowledged with a good-natured shrug. But the offer stands if you change your mind. I know these parts pretty well, and I've tracked my share of both the two-legged and four-legged variety of varmints. Before Clara could respond, a commotion erupted near the livestock pens. Raised voices carried across the fairgrounds, and people began hurrying in that direction. Cole's expression turned serious, and without thinking, Clara followed as he strode toward the disturbance. They arrived to find a crowd gathered around two men squared off in the dust, circling each other like angry roosters. Clara recognized one of them immediately as Frank Donovan, whose family owned one of the largest spreads in the county. The other was a younger man she did not know, but who wore the rough clothes of a working cowhand. "I don't give a damn what you think you saw," Donovan was snarling, his face red with anger. "You're nothing but hired help with a big mouth. I saw you switching those brand marks," the younger man shot back, his fists clenched at his sides. "I saw it with my own eyes, and I'm not going to keep quiet about it." Cole stepped forward, placing himself between the two men with a calm authority that seemed to diffuse some of the immediate tension. "Let's all take a breath here," he said evenly. "Frank, what's this about?" Donovan's lip curled. "Stay out of this, Ashford. This doesn't concern the Bar 7. "It concerns everyone if there's cheating going on at the fair," Cole replied, his voice still level but with an edge of steel beneath it. "What's the accusation?" The younger cowhand, emboldened by Cole's support, spoke up. "I saw him swapping the ear tags on the cattle entries, moving his numbers onto the better stock so he'd win the breeding competition. I've got no reason to lie, I'm just saying what I saw." A murmur ran through the crowd. The breeding competition carried a substantial cash prize and a lot of prestige, enough to make it worth cheating for. Frank Donovan's face had gone from red to nearly purple. "That's slander," he spat. "I'll have you run out of this county. Why don't we let the fair officials investigate?" Cole suggested, and Clara could see the careful diplomacy in his approach, trying to diffuse the situation before it turned violent. "If there's nothing to the claim, it'll clear your name. If there's truth to it, well, that needs to be addressed." Donovan looked like he wanted to argue further, but the gathering crowd and the arrival of Sheriff Mackey seemed to convince him to hold his tongue. The sheriff, a grizzled man in his 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor, took statements from both men and declared he would investigate the matter thoroughly. As the crowd dispersed, still buzzing with gossip, Clara found herself walking alongside Cole back toward the main pavilion. The afternoon sun was beginning its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. "You handled that well," Clara observed. "Most men would have let it come to blows." Cole shrugged. "Fighting rarely solves anything, and it always costs something. Frank Donovan's got a temper, but he's not worth breaking your knuckles over." He paused, then glanced at her with those startling blue eyes. "You sticking around for the evening festivities? They usually have dancing once the sun goes down." Clara's heart did an unexpected skip. "I should probably be getting back. My father will be wondering where I am." "It's a fair distance to the running tee," Cole said. "You riding alone?" "I've got my horse tied up near the entrance. I'll be fine." Clara tried to sound confident, but the truth was the ride home would take her the better part of 2 hours, and she would be alone on roads that were not always safe. Cole looked like he wanted to argue but seemed to think better of it. "Well, Miss Thornton, congratulations again on your win. I hope I'll be seeing you around." "Maybe," Clara said, and then, surprising herself, added, "Thank you for the offer to help earlier. If we do need tracking assistance, I'll keep you in mind." His smile was warm and genuine. "You do that?" Clara made her way through the thinning crowds, her blue ribbon carefully folded in her pocket, her mind replaying the conversation with the tall cowboy. She told herself it was foolish to feel anything about a chance meeting with a stranger, that she had more important things to worry about than blue eyes and kind offers of help. But as she untied her mare and headed east toward home, she could not quite shake the image of Cole Ashford from her thoughts. The Running T Ranch house sat in a shallow valley surrounded by scrubby mesquite and live oak, a modest structure of weathered wood that had seen better days. Clara arrived just as twilight was settling over the land, turning the sky purple and pink. Her father, James Thornton, was standing on the porch, and the look on his face told her immediately that something was wrong. "We lost 2 more," he said without preamble as she dismounted. "Broad daylight this time. I heard the commotion and rode out, but whoever it was had already scattered them. Found tracks heading west toward the big ravine." Clara felt her moment of triumph at the fair drain away. 2 more head was a devastating loss for their small operation. They had fewer than 40 cattle total, and everyone counted toward their ability to survive the winter ahead. "Did you see anything?" she asked, leading her mare toward the small barn. Her father shook his head, frustration evident in every line of his weathered face. "Just dust and tracks. They knew what they were doing, struck fast and hard. This isn't random, Clara. Someone's targeting us specifically." Inside the house, Clara set about making supper with mechanical efficiency, her mind racing. The blue ribbon sat on the kitchen table, a small splash of color in the dim lamplight, but it felt hollow now in the face of their mounting problems. Her father ate in silence, the lines around his eyes deeper than she remembered them being even a month ago. "We can't keep absorbing these losses," James said finally, pushing his plate away half-eaten. "I'm going to have to ride into town tomorrow, see about taking out a loan to tide us over." "The bank already turned us down once," Clara reminded him gently. "Then I'll try the private lenders." His voice was grim. Everyone knew the private lenders charged rates that could trap a man in debt for years, but what choice did they have? Clara lay awake long into the night, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling around her. The creak of old wood, the distant call of a night bird, the restless movement of their remaining cattle in the near pasture. She thought about her mother, who had been the heart of this place, who had made even the hardest days bearable with her quiet strength and unfailing optimism. She thought about the pie, about the small victory that had felt so significant just hours ago. And she thought, though she tried not to, about a blue-eyed cowboy with a kind smile and an offer of help. The next morning dawned clear and hot. Clara was up before the sun, tending to the chickens and the milk cow, checking the water troughs and surveying the property with a practiced eye. Everything looked peaceful in the early morning light, but she could not shake the sense of being watched, of some threat lurking just beyond her line of sight. Her father left for town mid-morning, riding their older gelding and carrying what remained of their savings in his saddlebag. Clara spent the day doing the endless work that kept a ranch functioning, mending tack, clearing brush, checking fence lines in the areas closest to the house. It was hot, exhausting labor, and by mid-afternoon she was covered in dust and sweat, her hands raw despite her worn gloves. She was hauling water from the well when she heard the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Clara's heart jumped into her throat, and she dropped the bucket, running for the rifle her father kept just inside the door. But when she turned back, scanning the horizon, she recognized the rider immediately. Cole Ashford rode into the yard on a handsome sorrel gelding, sitting easy in the saddle with the natural grace of someone who had spent most of his life on horseback. He raised a hand in greeting as he approached, and Clara lowered the rifle, feeling foolish and relieved in equal measure. "Afternoon, Miss Thornton," Cole called out, reining in his horse a respectful distance from the porch. Hope I'm not intruding. That depends on why you're here, Clara replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. She was acutely aware of how she must look, dusty and disheveled, nothing like the properly presented young woman from the fair. Cole dismounted, looping his reins over the hitching post. I've been asking around about your rustling problem. Turns out you're not the only small rancher who's been hit lately. The McBride place lost a dozen head 2 weeks ago, and the Parkers had their entire summer calf crop scattered last month. Clara felt a chill despite the heat. That's a coordinated effort. That's what I'm thinking. Cole pulled off his hat, wiping his brow with his sleeve. And I've got a theory about who might be behind it. Frank Donovan. The name hung in the air between them. Clara thought back to the confrontation at the fair, to the accusations of cheating and brand tampering. What makes you think it's him? She asked. Cole's expression was serious. Frank's been trying to consolidate land in this area for the past year. His father wants to expand their operation, and they've been buying up struggling ranches at cut-rate prices. Easiest way to make a ranch struggle is to bleed it dry of livestock. It made a horrible kind of sense. Clara had heard about the Donovan family's expansion, about how they seemed to swoop in like vultures whenever someone fell on hard times. But knowing it and proving it were two different things. Even if you're right, what can we do about it? Clara asked, exhaustion making her voice sharper than she intended. We don't have proof, and the Donovans have half the county officials in their pocket. We get proof, Cole said simply. I've got some time before the next big drive, and I'm good at tracking. Let me help you stake out your herd, see if we can catch whoever's doing this in the act. Clara wanted to say yes immediately, but caution held her back. Why would you do this? You don't even know us. Cole was quiet for a moment, his blue eyes steady on hers. Because it's the right thing to do. Because people like the Donovans only get away with this kind of thing if everyone's too scared or too tired to stand up to them. And because, he paused, a hint of color rising in his tanned cheeks. Because I liked talking to you at the fair, and I'd like to help if I can. Something warm unfurled in Clara's chest. She thought about her father making the desperate trip to the bank, about the dwindling herd and the uncertain future. She thought about facing all of it alone or accepting help from this man who had ridden out of his way to offer it. All right, she said finally, but I'm helping too. This is my ranch, my herd. Cole's smile was like sunrise. I wouldn't have it any other way. They spent the remainder of the afternoon going over the ranch's layout, examining the tracks from the previous thefts, and planning their surveillance strategy. Cole had a tracker's eye for detail, pointing out things Clara had missed, reading the story written in bent grass and disturbed earth. He estimated at least 3 men had been involved in the most recent theft, riding in from the west and driving the stolen cattle toward the ravine country, where they could easily be hidden or rebranded. When James Thornton returned just before sunset, looking even more defeated than when he had left, he found his daughter and a strange cowboy studying a hand-drawn map spread across the kitchen table. Clara made the introductions quickly, explaining Cole's theory about the systematic targeting of small ranches and his offer to help. She watched her father's face carefully, knowing his pride might bristle at accepting help from a stranger, but James surprised her. I'm grateful for the assistance, he said simply, shaking Cole's hand. Lord knows we need it. The bank turned me down flat, and the private lenders want interest rates that would put us in debt for the next decade. They ate a simple supper together, talking through plans and possibilities. Cole had a straightforward way of discussing problems that Clara found reassuring, breaking down seemingly overwhelming challenges into manageable steps. By the time darkness fell completely, they had agreed to begin the stakeout that very night. Cole would take the first watch, hidden in a copse of trees overlooking the main pasture. Clara insisted on taking the second shift, despite her father's protests, arguing that she knew the land and the animals better than anyone. They would rotate through until dawn, and repeat the process each night until they either caught the rustlers or convinced them to move on to easier targets. The night was cool after the scorching day, the sky scattered with more stars than seemed possible. Clara brought Cole a thermos of coffee and a blanket around midnight, finding him alert and watchful in his hidden position. "All quiet so far," he reported in a low voice. "Though I saw a coyote earlier that looked about as big as a small horse." Clara settled beside him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body in the chill night air. "Probably old One Eye. He's been around for years. My father took a shot at him once back when I was 14, missed, obviously, but took out part of his ear. Now he's learned to keep his distance." 14, Cole mused. "That was what, 6 years ago?" 7, Clara corrected. "I'm 21 now, old maid territory according to my aunt in Houston." Cole snorted softly. "Your aunt sounds like she has too much time on her hands. 21 is hardly ancient." "How old are you?" Clara asked, then immediately felt forward for asking. 26, Cole replied easily. "Been working cattle since I was 13, after my parents died of fever. Worked my way up from horse handler to trail boss at the bar 7. It's not my own spread, but the owner treats his people fair and the work is honest." There was no self-pity in his voice, just a straightforward recounting of facts, but Clara felt a kinship in their shared experience of loss. "My mother passed 2 years ago, pneumonia. We thought she was getting better, and then one morning she just didn't wake up." "I'm sorry," Cole said quietly, and the simple sincerity in his voice made Clara's throat tighten with unexpected emotion. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds and watching the slow movement of the cattle in the moonlight. Clara found herself very aware of Cole's presence beside her, of the solid strength he seemed to carry so easily, of the way his profile looked in the starlight. "You should get some rest," Cole said eventually. "You'll need to be sharp for your watch." Clara nodded, rising to her feet with reluctance she did not want to examine too closely. "Wake me at 2. The rest of the night passed without incident, as did the next 2 nights. By the 4th day, Clara was exhausted from the broken sleep and constant vigilance, but also strangely energized by Cole's continued presence. He showed up each evening just before dusk, helped with whatever chores needed doing, shared their simple meals, and took his post without complaint. During the long watches they shared, she learned about his life on the trail, about the vast distances he had covered driving cattle north to market, about his dreams of someday having his own small ranch where he could settle down and build something lasting. "Not a big operation like the Bar 7, he explained one night, his voice thoughtful. "Just something manageable. Good grass, reliable water, maybe a few hundred head. Room for a garden, space for a family." He paused, then added with what sounded like deliberate casualness, "Be nice to have someone to build it with, though. Ranch work is lonely business on your own." Clara's heart was beating faster than it should. "I imagine you'd have no shortage of candidates. Handsome cowboy with steady work and good prospects." "Handsome am I?" Cole's voice held a smile in the darkness. "You must own a mirror," Clara retorted, grateful he could not see the blush burning her cheeks. "Maybe so," Cole allowed. "But handsome doesn't count for much if you can't find someone who understands the life. Someone who knows what it takes to make a ranch work, who isn't afraid of hard times or hard work. Someone who can bake a prize-winning pie wouldn't hurt either." Clara's breath caught. Before she could formulate a response, Cole straightened suddenly, his hand moving to her shoulder in a silent warning. "There," he breathed, pointing toward the western edge of the pasture. Clara followed his gaze and saw them, 3 dark shapes moving carefully toward the herd. Even in the moonlight, She could see the practiced way they worked, beginning to separate a group of cattle from the main body. Her anger flared hot and immediate. "Stay here," Cole whispered, already moving. "Like hell," Clara whispered back, checking the rifle she had brought. They crept forward together, using the terrain for cover, getting close enough to confirm what they were seeing. 3 men, faces covered with bandanas, efficiently cutting out half a dozen head and beginning to drive them west. In the moonlight, Clara could make out the brands on the horses they rode, the distinctive double D mark of the Donovan Ranch. Cole held up a hand, counting down silently. On 3, they both stood up, Cole's voice ringing out clear and commanding across the pasture. "That's far enough. Stay right where you are." The rustlers froze, then one of them wheeled his horse around, his hand dropping toward the gun at his hip. Cole fired a shot into the air, the report echoing across the quiet landscape. "Next one won't be a warning," he called out. "Now get down off those horses, nice and slow." For a moment, Clara thought they might actually comply. Then the lead rider spurred his horse forward, not toward them but away, abandoning the stolen cattle and making for the ravine country at a gallop. The other 2 followed immediately, scattering in different directions. Cole swore and started to run for his own horse, but Clara grabbed his arm. "Let them go. We got the cattle back and we know who they work for." "Knowing and proving are different things," Cole said, frustration evident in his voice. "We've got this," Clara said, bending down to retrieve something from the ground where the rustlers had been. It was a leather glove, high quality, with initials tooled into the cuff. "FD." Cole took it from her, examining it in the moonlight, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Well now, that's interesting." The next morning, they rode into San Angelo with the glove, a detailed written account of what they had witnessed, and a list of the other ranchers who had been hit. Sheriff Mackey listened to their story with a grave expression, turning the glove over in his weathered hands. "This is serious business," he said finally. "The Donovans won't take kindly to these accusations. The Donovans won't have much choice if you do your job and investigate," Cole said, his voice hard. "How many more ranches have to be bled dry before something gets done?" Mackey's jaw tightened, but Clara saw something shift in his eyes, a core of integrity that had not quite been bought off despite the Donovans' influence. "I'll look into it. But I'll need statements from the other victims, and you both will need to be willing to testify if this goes before a judge." "We're willing," Clara said firmly. The investigation moved faster than Clara had dared hope. Sheriff Mackey, perhaps stung by Cole's implications, or perhaps simply fed up with the Donovans' overreach, conducted a thorough examination of the evidence. He found matching gloves in Frank Donovan's possession, traced the stolen cattle to a hidden canyon on Donovan property, and convinced one of the hired rustlers to turn witness in exchange for leniency. By late August, Frank Donovan and 2 of his ranch hands were in jail awaiting trial, and the story was the talk of the county. The stolen cattle were returned to their rightful owners, and several struggling ranches suddenly found themselves able to breathe again. Throughout it all, Cole was a constant presence. What had started as an offer to help had become something more, something neither of them spoke about directly, but that hummed in the air between them like heat lightning. He showed up at the running tea almost every evening, helping James and Clara with the endless work of keeping the ranch running. He fixed the sagging barn door that had been broken since Clara was 16. He helped them move the herd to better grazing in the high pasture. He made Clara laugh with stories of trail drives and cowboy misadventures, and made her pulse race with the way he looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention. As summer slid toward autumn, Clara found herself falling for Cole Ashford with an inevitability that should have terrified her, but somehow did not. He was everything she had not known she was looking for, Steady and strong but also kind, capable of both hard work and gentle humor, someone who understood the life she lived because he lived it too. The first truly cool evening came in mid-September, bringing with it the promise of the changing season. Clara was on the porch shelling beans when Cole rode up, and the look on his face told her something was different. "Walk with me," he asked, dismounting and securing his horse. Clara set aside her work and followed him away from the house, out toward the old apple tree where she had picked the fruit for her prize-winning pie. The tree was heavy now with the late-season crop, apples that would need to be harvested soon before the first frost claimed them. Cole stopped beneath the spreading branches, the dappled shade dancing across his features. He seemed nervous, which was so unlike his usual easy confidence that Clara felt her own heart begin to race. "I've been thinking," Cole began, then stopped, running a hand through his hair in an uncharacteristically awkward gesture. "Hell, I've been thinking about this for weeks now, and there's no smooth way to say it, so I'm just going to speak plain." Clara waited, barely breathing. "I'm in love with you, Clara," Cole said, his blue eyes meeting hers with absolute honesty. "I think I started falling for you the moment I saw you at that fair, looking so proud and scared at the same time, holding that ribbon like it meant the world. And then I got to know you, got to see your strength and your stubbornness and your kindness, and I fell even harder. I know it's fast, and I know you've got every reason to be cautious, but I needed you to know. I needed you to know that this isn't just passing through for me. You're not just passing through for me." Clara felt tears prickling her eyes, but they were good tears, joyful tears. "You're not just passing through for me either," she said, her voice catching on the words. "I was so lonely, Cole. After my mother died, after watching my father struggle and knowing we were losing everything bit by bit, I felt like I was drowning. And then you showed up and you saw me. Not just some struggling rancher's daughter, but me. You made me remember that there was more to life than just surviving." Cole closed the distance between them in 2 long steps, his hands coming up to frame her face with infinite gentleness. "I want to court you proper," he said. "I want to do this right, with your father's blessing and all the proper steps. But I need to know if you want that too, if there's a chance you might feel the same way I do." "I already feel the same way," Clara whispered, and then his lips were on hers, warm and gentle and full of promise. The kiss was everything a first kiss should be, sweet and slightly awkward and absolutely perfect. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and smiling, Clara felt as if the world had shifted on its axis in the best possible way. They walked back to the house hand in hand, and Cole formally asked James Thornton for permission to court his daughter. Clara watched her father's face carefully, knowing he could be protective and skeptical of any man who came calling. But James looked at Cole, really looked at him, seeing the man who had helped save their ranch, who had shown up day after day without expectation of reward, who had treated his daughter with respect and kindness. "You'll treat her right?" James asked, his voice gruff. "Better than right," Cole promised. "I'll spend every day trying to deserve her." James nodded slowly, and Clara saw moisture in his eyes that had not been there since her mother's funeral. "Then you have my blessing and my thanks." The weeks that followed were among the happiest Clara had ever known. Cole courted her with old-fashioned propriety and modern enthusiasm, bringing her wildflowers he picked on his rides, teaching her tricks for working with the more stubborn horses, sitting with her on the porch in the evenings, and talking about everything and nothing. They stole kisses in the barn and held hands when they thought James was not looking, and fell more deeply in love with each passing day. The trial took place in early October, with the leaves just beginning to turn gold and rust. Clara and Cole both testified, describing what they had witnessed that night in the pasture. The evidence was overwhelming, and Frank Donovan was convicted of cattle theft and sentenced to 5 years in prison. His father, Old Man Donovan, made threats about appeals and influence, but the verdict stood. Justice, for once, had been served. After the trial, Cole took Clara to dinner at the hotel in San Angelo, a rare extravagance that made her feel like a fine lady in her best dress. Over roast beef and potatoes, Cole reached across the table and took her hand. "I talked to my boss at the bar 7, he said. "Told him I wanted to start looking for my own place, something small I could build up. He's willing to stake me to some starter stock in exchange for me helping with one more big drive next spring." Clara's heart was pounding. "That's wonderful, Cole. You'll make a success of it, I know you will." "I want you to be part of it," Cole said, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "Not just as my wife, though I very much want you to be that. As my partner. I've seen what you can do, Clara. You've got an eye for cattle and a head for business, and you understand this life. I want us to build something together, something that's ours." "Are you proposing to me in a hotel dining room?" Clara asked, joy bubbling up inside her like champagne. Cole grinned, that mischievous smile she had come to adore. "I suppose I am, though I should probably do it more formally." He stood up, and Clara realized with a mixture of horror and delight that he was actually going to kneel right there in the middle of the restaurant. "Cole, you don't have to." But he was already down on one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. The other diners were beginning to notice, and Clara felt her face burning, but she could not stop smiling. "Clara Mae Thornton," Cole said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room, "would you do me the tremendous honor of becoming my wife? I promise to love you and challenge you and make you laugh for all the days I'm given. I promise to be the kind of partner you deserve in ranching and in life. I can't promise things will always be easy, but I can promise they'll never be boring and that I'll stand by you through whatever comes." The ring was simple silver with a small ruby, the color of summer apples. Clara felt tears streaming down her face as she nodded, unable to form words past the lump in her throat. "Yes," she finally managed. "Yes, absolutely yes." The restaurant erupted in applause as Cole stood and kissed her, and Clara laughed against his lips, happier than she had ever imagined being possible. They were married in late November in a small ceremony at the church in San Angelo. Clara wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved and altered to fit her slimmer frame. Cole wore a new suit that he claimed made him feel like a trussed turkey, but that Clara thought made him look devastatingly handsome. James walked his daughter down the aisle with tears in his eyes, and half the county turned out to witness the union of the woman whose pie had won the fair and the cowboy who had won her heart. The wedding was followed by a reception at the fairgrounds pavilion, with music and dancing and more food than Clara had seen in one place since before her mother died. Mrs. Caldwell, the baking judge, presented them with a set of pie plates as a wedding gift. The sheriff gave them a set of matching rifles with their initials engraved on the stocks. Even some of the big ranchers, having gained respect for Clara and Cole during the trial, showed up with gifts of livestock and supplies. But the best moment came late in the evening, when the dancing was in full swing, and Clara found herself in Cole's arms, swaying to a waltz played by a fiddler whose enthusiasm exceeded his technical skill. "I love you, Mrs. Ashford," Cole murmured against her hair. "I love you too," Clara replied, and meant it with every fiber of her being. They spent their wedding night at the hotel, the same one where Cole had proposed, and if Clara blushed to return to the scene of that public declaration, she was too happy to care much. Cole was gentle and patient, making her first time a sweet exploration rather than an ordeal. They talked and laughed and loved until the early hours of the morning, wrapped in each other and the promise of their future together. The winter that followed was hard work but joyful work. Cole moved his few possessions to the running T, and he and Clara threw themselves into running the ranch alongside James. They worked from dawn to dusk, repairing buildings that had fallen into disrepair, improving the herd through careful breeding decisions, and planning for the spring. Cole's expertise combined with Clara's intimate knowledge of their land proved to be a formidable combination, and by the time the spring thaw came, the running T was on more solid footing than it had been in years. In April, Cole left for his final cattle drive with the Bar 7, a 2-month journey north to market. He hated leaving Clara, and she hated watching him go, but they both knew this drive would give them the capital they needed to really establish themselves. Clara threw herself into work during his absence, keeping busy to avoid dwelling on her worry, and when Cole returned in June, sunburned and trail-worn and carrying a bank draft that represented their future, she flew into his arms with such force that she nearly knocked them both over. With their combined resources, they were able to purchase the adjoining property from an elderly rancher who was retiring. This doubled their land and gave them access to a year-round creek that would make all the difference in the dry summer months. They spent the summer building a new barn and a modest but comfortable house, a real home where they could start their life together properly. Clara discovered she was pregnant in August, just over a year after that fateful county fair. She told Cole one evening as they sat on the porch of their new house, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in impossible colors. "We're going to have a baby," she said simply, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. Cole's face went through a series of expressions, shock and joy and fear and wonder all chasing across his features in rapid succession. Then he let out a whoop of pure happiness and lifted her carefully into his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and protested that he would make her dizzy. "We're going to be parents," he said, setting her down gently and cupping her face in his hands. "You're going to be a mother. Lord help me, I'm going to be a father." "You'll be a wonderful father," Clara assured him, covering his hands with her own. "I'll try my best," Cole promised, "though I have to admit I'm terrified." "Me too," Clara confessed. "But we'll figure it out together. That's what we do." The pregnancy was relatively easy, though Clara continued working the ranch until her size made it impractical. Cole became absurdly protective, trying to prevent her from doing anything more strenuous than sitting and knitting, until Clara finally had to tell him firmly that she was pregnant, not dying, and that she would go mad if he did not let her be useful. Their son was born in March of 1884, arriving in the early morning hours after a labor that was long but, according to the midwife, fairly routine. Cole paced the living room like a caged animal while Clara labored in the bedroom, and when the baby's first cries finally rang out, he burst through the door before the midwife could even finish cleaning up. "A boy," Clara said tiredly, holding their son against her chest. "We have a son, Cole." Cole approached the bed as if in a trance, staring down at the tiny red-faced infant with an expression of such pure wonder that Clara felt fresh tears spring to her eyes. "He's perfect," Cole breathed. "Clara, he's absolutely perfect." They named him James Thomas Ashford after both their fathers, but from the first they called him Jamie. He was a healthy baby with a good set of lungs and his father's blue eyes, and Cole took to fatherhood like he took to everything else, with wholehearted commitment. He would walk the floor with Jamie at night when the baby was fussy, singing old trail songs in his rough baritone. He fashioned a cradle from smooth oak and spent hours watching his son sleep, marveling at tiny fingers and the miracle of new life. The ranch continued to prosper. Word had spread about their role in bringing down the Donovan theft ring, and other small ranchers began seeking out their advice and partnership. Cole's reputation as a fair dealer and skilled cattleman grew, and Clara's business acumen helped them make smart decisions about when to buy and sell, how to invest their profits back into the operation. By the time Jamie was walking, they had built up a herd of nearly 200 head and employed 2 full-time ranch hands. James Thornton, who had moved into a small cottage they built on the property, spent his days doting on his grandson and offering advice born of decades of experience. Clara sometimes thought back to that summer day at the fair, standing in the hot sun with flour in her hair and hope in her heart, clutching a blue ribbon that had seemed like the most important thing in the world. She had thought winning that competition was her great triumph, proof that she was more than just a struggling rancher's daughter. But the real triumph had been everything that came after. The real prize had not been a ribbon or recognition, but the man who had seen her that day and decided to get to know the woman behind the pie. Cole had not been looking for a trophy wife or a cook or even a ranching partner that day at the fair, though he had ended up with all 3. He had simply seen Clara, truly seen her, and that had made all the difference. The years rolled by with the steady rhythm of ranching life. There were good years and lean years, wet springs and dry summers, losses that hurt and triumphs that made it all worthwhile. Clara and Cole faced them all together, their partnership growing stronger with each challenge overcome. Jamie was joined by a sister when he was 3, a fierce little thing they named Rose after Clara's mother. Rose came into the world with a full head of dark hair and a stubborn streak that rivaled her mother's. Where Jamie was thoughtful and measured, Rose was bold and impulsive, keeping her parents on their toes from the moment she could crawl. 2 years after Rose came another boy, Thomas, named after Cole's father. Thomas was the quiet one, content to observe the world with solemn gray eyes, happiest when reading or helping his mother in the kitchen. He showed early promise as a baker, much to Clara's delight, and she taught him all her mother's recipes, including the one for the prize-winning apple pie. The Running T became known as one of the most well-run ranches in the county, a place where cattle were treated humanely and employees were paid fair wages. Cole and Clara took pride in building something that reflected their values, something that would last beyond their own lifetimes. They attended the county fair every year, a family tradition that the children looked forward to all summer. Clara entered her pies religiously, though she never cared as much about winning as she had that first year. She had found something far more valuable than ribbons that summer when Cole Ashford had walked into her life. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Cole surprised Clara with a gift. He led her out to the eastern pasture, where a new building stood, small but well-constructed, with large windows and a stone chimney. "Your own kitchen house," Cole explained, grinning at her confused expression. "A place where you can bake and experiment without worrying about the regular meal schedule or the kids getting underfoot. I know how much you love it, and I thought you deserved a space that was all yours." Clara walked through the building in wonder. There was a massive cast-iron stove, far nicer than the one in the main house. Shelves for supplies and equipment. A large work table with a marble top, perfect for rolling out pastry. Windows that filled the space with natural light. "Cole," she breathed, turning to face her husband, "this is too much." "Nothing is too much for you," Cole said seriously, pulling her into his arms. "You gave up your whole life to build this ranch with me. The least I can do is give you a place to pursue your passion. Besides, I'm hoping this means more of those apple pies." Clara laughed, rising on her toes to kiss him. "You'll have all the apple pie you can eat," and she meant it. Over the years that followed, Clara's baking became almost as famous as the ranch itself. She taught Rose and eventually the ranch cook to make her signature pie, and it became a tradition to serve it at major celebrations and gatherings. But more importantly, the kitchen house became Clara's sanctuary, a place where she could create and think and remember the woman she had been before all of this, while also celebrating the woman she had become. James Thornton passed peacefully in his sleep when Jamie was 12, Rose was 9, and Thomas was 7. It was a sad time, but also a celebration of a life well lived. The old rancher had seen his daughter married to a good man, had watched his grandchildren grow, and had lived to see the running T become everything he had dreamed it could be. "He was proud of you," Cole told Clara the night after they buried James in the family plot next to her mother. "He told me once that saving the ranch was nothing compared to finding you a partner who truly deserved you. He liked you from the start," Clara said, leaning against her husband's solid warmth. "Even when he was trying to be all stern and protective, I could tell he approved. I'm grateful I got to know him," Cole said. "He taught me a lot about ranching, but more about being a good man and a good father." The children grew and thrived. Jamie showed early promise as a rancher, with his father's easy way with horses and his mother's strategic mind. He was patient and hardworking, often up before dawn to help with the day's tasks without being asked. By the time he was 16, Cole was trusting him with significant responsibilities, and Jamie never let him down. Rose, true to her fiery nature, initially resisted the idea of staying on the ranch. She wanted adventure, wanted to see the cities and experience the wider world. Clara and Cole supported her dreams even as they hoped she would eventually return. They sent her to a finishing school in Houston when she was 17, and she thrived there, learning business and literature and making connections that would serve her well. But Rose came home after 2 years, arriving unannounced one spring morning with a carpetbag full of books and a head full of ideas about modernizing ranch operations. She had missed the wide sky and the honest work, had discovered that city life, while exciting, lacked the substance she craved. Cole and Clara welcomed her back with open arms and open minds, listening to her proposals about new breeding techniques and marketing strategies. Thomas, the quietest of the three, discovered a passion for veterinary medicine. He studied under the local veterinarian and eventually left for college in Austin, returning 4 years later with a degree and a wife, a sweet-natured schoolteacher named Margaret. They built a house on the edge of the ranch property, and Thomas set up a practice that served not just the running T but all the surrounding ranches. As Cole and Clara moved through their 40s and into their 50s, they began to gradually hand over more of the daily operations to their children. It was not retirement exactly, but a gentle stepping back, trusting the next generation to carry forward what they had built. They took time for themselves in ways they never had before. Long rides across their property, just the two of them and the open sky. Trips to San Antonio and even once to New Orleans, seeing sights and experiencing things beyond the boundaries of their ranch. Quiet evenings on the porch, holding hands and watching the sunset, needing no words after so many years together. "Do you ever regret it?" Cole asked one evening, 30 years after that first meeting at the county fair. "Marrying a cowboy and spending your life on a ranch, you could have had an easier life." Clara looked at him, at the man who was somehow even more handsome to her now than he had been at 26. Silver threaded through his dark hair, and time had added lines to his face, but his blue eyes were as clear and kind as ever. He was the man who had believed in her when she needed it most, who had built a life with her through hard work and harder times, who had loved her steadily and completely through everything. "Easier doesn't mean better," Clara said firmly. "This life, our life, has been exactly what I wanted. I won a blue ribbon that summer, but I won something far more valuable in the autumn. I won a partner, a love, a future. I won you. I would not trade a single day of it." Cole's smile was warm and full of love. "Even the day the barn roof collapsed and we had to spend a week rebuilding it in the rain. Even that day," Clara confirmed, laughing, "though I could have done without the mud." They grew old together gracefully, watching their grandchildren arrive and begin to run wild across the same land where they had built their dreams. Jamie married a neighboring rancher's daughter and gave them 3 grandchildren. Rose, surprising everyone, fell in love with a traveling horse trader and eventually settled on a portion of the ranch with him, raising championship quarter horses and 2 children. Thomas and Margaret had 4 children, including a daughter who showed early signs of inheriting her grandfather's veterinary talents. On the 50th anniversary of their meeting, their children and grandchildren organized a celebration at the ranch. The entire county seemed to turn out, filling the grounds with laughter and music, and more food than could possibly be consumed. The centerpiece of the dessert table was Clara's apple pie, the same recipe that had won first place all those years ago, now made by 3 generations of Ashford women working together. Cole stood up to make a speech, his voice still strong despite his 76 years. 50 years ago, I saw a beautiful woman at the county fair, holding a blue ribbon and looking like she had just conquered the world. I didn't know then that talking to her would change my life completely. I didn't know that her courage and her kindness would become the foundation of everything I hold dear. Clara Mae Thornton, now Ashford, you have given me the greatest gift anyone could ask for. You gave me a life worth living, a love worth fighting for, and a legacy worth leaving. I love you more today than I did 50 years ago, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond. There was not a dry eye in the crowd as Cole sat down and Clara leaned over to kiss him, their love story coming full circle in the exact spot where they had planted their first crop together as husband and wife. As the party continued around them, Clara thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a struggling ranch and a pie competition to this sprawling family and successful operation. From a chance meeting and an offer of help to a love that had sustained them through 5 decades of life's challenges and joys. The blue ribbon from that long-ago fair was framed on the wall of their bedroom, a reminder of where it all began. But the real prize had never been the ribbon. The real prize was the life they had built together, the family they had raised, the love they had nurtured through all the seasons of their lives. Cole took her hand as the sun began to set, painting the Texas sky in the same brilliant colors it had shown on countless evenings before. Ready for the next 50 years, Mrs. Ashford. Clara laughed, squeezing his hand. I'll take as many as we can get, Mr. Ashford. And as the stars began to appear overhead, the same stars that had watched over them through courtship and marriage, through struggles and triumphs, through the raising of children and the building of dreams, Clara knew that she had lived a life worth celebrating. Her pie had won first place at the county fair that summer, opening a door she had not known existed. But Cole Ashford had won her heart by autumn, and in doing so had given her something far more valuable than any ribbon or recognition. He had given her a partnership, a passion, and a love that had only grown stronger with time. The ranch would continue after they were gone, carried forward by capable hands and loving hearts. The land would remain, solid and enduring beneath the vast Texas sky. But the true legacy of Clara and Cole Ashford was not measured in acres or cattle or even grandchildren, though all of those were abundant. Their legacy was the proof that love, real and lasting love, was possible. That 2 people could meet by chance, fall in love by choice, and build something beautiful together through commitment, respect, and unwavering partnership. As the celebration wound down and their family began to drift toward their various homes across the ranch property, Cole and Clara remained on the porch, watching the last of the light fade from the sky. They sat in the comfortable silence of 2 people who had spent a lifetime learning each other's thoughts, who needed no words to communicate the depth of their contentment. "Thank you," Clara said finally, her head resting on Cole's shoulder. "For what?" Cole asked, his arm tightening around her. "For everything," Clara replied simply. "For seeing me that day at the fair, for helping us when we needed it, for staying and building this life with me, for loving me so completely." "Clara," Cole said, his voice thick with emotion, "loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done. You made it easy by being exactly who you are, by letting me be part of your life, by choosing me every single day. If anyone should be saying thank you, it is me." They kissed then, softly and sweetly, a kiss that held 50 years of history and the promise of whatever time remained. And as the moon rose over the Running T Ranch, casting silver light across the land they had tamed and nurtured together, Clara Mae Ashford knew with absolute certainty that she had lived a blessed life. Her pie had won first place at the county fair that summer of 1882, bringing her recognition and a moment of triumph when she had desperately needed both. But Cole Ashford had won her heart by autumn, and in return she had given him hers freely and completely. Together they had built not just a ranch but a dynasty, not just a family but a legacy of love. The years continued to pass gently after that golden anniversary. Cole and Clara remained active for several more years, though they moved more slowly and rested more often. They still took their evening walks, though they went shorter distances. They still sat on the porch together, watching the sun paint the sky, still held hands like newlyweds after more than 50 years of marriage. Cole passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 81, with Clara beside him in the bed they had shared for 55 years. His last words to her were, "Best decision I ever made, talking to you at that fair." Clara held him as he slipped away, her tears falling on the face she had loved longer than she had not loved it, grateful beyond measure for the life they had shared. She lived another 3 years after Cole's death, surrounded by children and grandchildren and even great-grandchildren who visited constantly, making sure she was never alone. But Clara was lonely without her partner, her other half, the man who had made every day an adventure. She remained sharp and engaged, still offering advice on ranch operations, still baking her famous pie for family gatherings, but there was a piece of her that was simply waiting. On a bright autumn morning, 71 years after that fateful county fair, Clara Mae Ashford passed away in her sleep, a peaceful end to a remarkable life. They buried her next to Cole in the family plot, under a spreading oak tree that they had planted together when they first broke ground on their house. The entire county turned out for her funeral, testament to the woman she had been and the legacy she had left. Her great-granddaughter, another Clara, found the blue ribbon among her belongings, carefully preserved and still bright despite its age. With it was a letter, written in Clara's elegant hand, addressed to future generations of Ashfords. The letter told the story of a summer day and a pie and a chance meeting that changed everything. It spoke of courage and faith, of taking risks and believing in possibilities. It urged them to never settle for less than real love, to seek partners who would stand beside them through all of life's challenges, to build something meaningful and lasting. "Your great-grandfather won my heart by autumn," Clara had written, "and I never regretted giving it to him. We built this ranch, this family, this legacy together. We faced hardships and celebrated triumphs as equal partners. That is what I wish for all of you, that kind of partnership, that depth of love. Do not be afraid to take chances on people who show you kindness. Do not be afraid to accept help when you need it. And never, ever underestimate the power of a really good apple pie." The letter ended with the recipe, written in meticulous detail, ensuring that future generations would be able to recreate the pie that started it all. The Running T Ranch continued to thrive under the management of Clara and Cole's descendants, each generation adding their own innovations while honoring the foundation that had been laid. The kitchen house Clara had loved so much was preserved as a family museum, displaying her blue ribbon, her wedding dress carefully maintained behind glass, and photographs documenting a life well lived and a love well celebrated. And every year at the county fair, now held in a modern facility that bore little resemblance to the rough pavilion of 1882, an Ashford woman entered an apple pie in the competition. Sometimes they won, sometimes they did not, but that was not really the point. The tradition was about remembering where they came from, about honoring a woman who had the courage to enter a contest when her life was falling apart, who had the wisdom to accept help from a kind stranger, and who had the good fortune to fall in love with a man who saw her for exactly who she was. The story of Clara's pie and Cole's courtship became family legend, told and retold at gatherings, embellished slightly with each generation but always maintaining its essential truth. It was a story about chance and choice, about how a single moment could change the trajectory of an entire life, about how real love was built not just on attraction or compatibility but on mutual respect, shared values, and a willingness to face whatever came together. In the end, it was a simple story. A woman made a pie. A cowboy tasted hope in that pie, saw strength in the woman who made it. He offered help, she accepted. Love grew from there, steady and true, like good grass in well-tended soil. They built a life that mattered, raised children who carried forward their values, left a mark on the land and the people around them. Clara's pie won first place at the county fair that summer, a blue ribbon that validated her skill and gave her a moment of triumph. But the real victory came in the autumn when she opened her heart to Cole Ashford and discovered that partnership, love, and shared purpose were worth more than any prize. They were worth everything, worth building toward, worth fighting for, worth celebrating every single day. And on autumn evenings, when the lights slanted gold across the Texas prairie and the air carried the first hint of coming winter, you could almost see them still, Clara and Cole, walking hand in hand across the land they had claimed and tamed together, their love story written in every fence post and building, in every blade of grass and head of cattle, in the faces of their descendants, who carried forward the legacy of two people who had met by chance and loved by choice, who had built something beautiful out of hard work, faith, and a prize-winning apple pie.